Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joins us tonight to discuss his campaign and the shocking treatment that he's received by the so-called Democrat Party. And sir, it's good to have you here. The first thing I noticed when you walked in is that you have Secret Service protection now.
Yes, I do.
Finally, which was about as petty and awful as politics can be to deprive you of that.
Yeah, it was unprecedented. I'm the first candidate. You know, they started giving Secret Service protection to the candidate pre-nomination when my father was shot in 1968. So they gave it that year to Wallace, to Gene McCarthy, and to Hubert Humphrey, and then Congress passed a law that gave it to candidates 120 days out, but with the proviso the president could provide it earlier, which they did.
Right.
35 times. They gave it to people who requested it. They've never denied it to a candidate who requested it. And I made 6 requests. The Secret Service itself was very good and said that I was an elevated risk. Advised the White House to give me protection, and they refused. It was kind of shocking, but it's part of this weaponization that we've seen across the board of the federal agencies that have now become politicized. You know, when my dad took over the Justice Department in 1961, the first week in office, he assembled all the division chiefs and the branch chiefs, and he said, "We never ask what somebody's political affiliation is. It's critical that people know that our institutions and government are not politicized, that they're blind to your political affiliation.
Right.
That justice is neutral. Otherwise, the American people are going to lose faith in their institutions, and that's really what makes American democracy work."
Yeah.
So it's been alarming this year. And you and I talked
Yeah.
before I went on about what happened to Tulsi Gabbard this
yeah.
week. It was just extraordinary. And I don't see why there is not more outrage and indignation from every corner of our country.
And you think that came from the White House to spy on Tulsi Gabbard?
It clearly came from the White House, and it came the day after she criticized President Biden. She was put on a list called the Quiet Eyes list, which had air marshals. Whenever she walked through an airport, she was being surveilled. She was being followed. Her cell phone texts were being photographed so that they could see what she was saying. And you know, this is the kind of thing they did in
Soviet
East
stuff.
Germany.
Yeah, I mean, this is
and
insane.
Russia.
Yeah.
And, you know, Savak and Iran. It's not.
How do people not understand? You know, I mean, this is what you're a liberal. You know, what we're seeing happen to your party is leftism. It's changing dramatically. I mean, this ticket that they now have between Kamala and Tim Walz. I mean, these two are not classical liberals by any stretch of the imagination. This is not the ticket that I think a lot of Democrats wanted. You know, this isn't. I mean, this party has changed a lot from the days of your father and your uncle. You agree?
Yeah, I don't think. You know, what I say is that every policy priority that my uncle and father have, I think it would check every box.
Yeah.
The party today, and this is, you know, their efforts. I spent the week in Albany there's 150,000 New Yorkers who signed petitions to put me on the ballot.
And they're suing to keep you on.
And the DNC is spending its $3 billion not amplifying the record of Biden and Harris, but rather trying to sabotage and keep off the ballot people who they don't want to run for election. When I grew up, the Democratic Party, my uncle, my father, Martin Luther King, the big objective of the Democratic Party was to give every American the right to vote for the person that they wanted to vote for.
Yeah.
And today, I liked what you said at the beginning. The Democratic Party is pretending to defend democracy by destroying it.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, they pushed me out of the primary, and I don't want to make this about me, but all of the weaponization of the courts against political candidates. I mean, they should run against Donald Trump, not try to put him in jail. And I'm not a fan of Donald Trump's.
Yeah.
I'm running against him myself. Yeah. I'm very critical of his policy, but I want to run on an even playing field. I don't want to win the presidency by putting my opponents in prison.
What you represent is, I mean, it's so binary in this country. And I've never liked that. I've always seen things with the Republican Party that I couldn't stand. I've seen things with the Democrat Party I couldn't stand. There was just a lot more from the Democrats, and they've moved a lot further left, which has scared me even more. But I mean, what you represent is the same thing that I think Trump is trying to represent as well, which is kind of like a common sense. Trump is, they'll never admit it, but he's very much more left than a lot of the candidates in the Republican Party on certain issues. He is, and I know you don't agree with everything he does, and you have a lot of criticisms of him, but you're both refreshing in that way. It's refreshing to listen to you and to think that, I mean, I really believe that if I was born, in 1945, that I would have voted for your uncle. I really believe that. I mean, when I listen to what he says, that is not what I hear at all from your party anymore. And you represent, just that classic liberalism that I think a lot of people want. I mean, I think you're the Democrat that party deserves. And I don't, really vote Democrat, but I see that in you. And I think that's why it's so refreshing. And that's why it's so frustrating to see that this is so binary. And that's my last question to you. It's just like, you're here, you're obviously you're running third party, I mean, is it, how do you do it? Like, I mean, do you really believe you can do it?
My objective from the beginning, I said, my objective is to try to bridge this terrible polarization that we have, Rob, in this country that's now, I think, more dangerous than at any time since the American Civil War. And it's even more dangerous because it's amplified by the social media algorithms, so that we are being driven further and further apart. The chasm between Americans is getting larger and larger. This hateful rhetoric.
Yes.
The polarization, I don't think the violence against President Trump is an accident. The same thing happened, when my uncle was shot. It was a time of terrible polarization.
You don't think it was an accident? Explain that.
Well, I just think there was, like, when my father was shot, was probably at that time the most divided, violent part of American history since the Civil War. When my uncle, President Kennedy, was shot, the newspapers had, and there were posters all over Dallas that day that were posted saying, with his picture on it, saying "wanted for treason, dead or alive." So, and I think part of the violence of that time was a result of all of this separation and the vitriol.
Yeah.
The division. And what I said is, I'm not going to feed into it. I'm not going to make personal attacks on President Biden or President Trump. I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to be congenial. I'm going to criticize their policies.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do it in a way that brings Americans together. And I'm going to look for those values that Americans have in common, rather than these issues that are used to keep us all at each other's throats, and try to become a president who will give power back to the people and who will unite America, because we have terrible problems right now. The economy, the addiction to war, the chronic disease epidemic, the destruction of our soils, all this. We can solve all those problems, but we can't solve them when we're fighting each other. We can only solve them when we come together, and that's what I'm trying to do.
I respect that. Sir, thank you so much.
Rob, thanks so much.
Mr. Kennedy, good to see you.